At my husband's funeral, his sister whispered, "He always said you were the weak one." I placed the envelope on his casket and said, "Then he won't need what's inside." Her face went white when she read the title. You know, after 42 years of marriage, you start to believe you've seen every version of a person. The gentle side, the cruel side, the part that loves you, and the part that quietly resents you. But standing there at my husband's funeral, with the scent of lilies and regret filling the air, I realized I had no idea who I'd really been married to. It was quiet, too quiet for a room full of mourners. I sat in the front row, my black gloves clutched tightly in my lap, listening to the pastor's voice fade in and out. I wasn't crying. I had already cried enough in the weeks leading up to this day. The tears had dried into something else, something sharper. Then, just as they were lowering his casket, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was his sister, Carol. She leaned in close, her perfume thick and her voice dripping with that familiar condescension she'd perfected over the years. "He always said you were the weak one," she whispered, like it was a secret meant to break me. I didn't flinch. I didn't even turn my head. I just smiled, a small, tired smile, and said softly, "Then he won't need what's inside." And with that, I placed the envelope on his casket. The white paper stood out sharply against the dark wood, like a final truth that couldn't be buried. Carol frowned, but before she could say anything, the pastor resumed his prayer. People bowed their heads. I didn't. I just kept looking at that envelope, sitting there like a ghost of everything I had learned. Inside it was more than paper. It was a story. My story. You see, I wasn't always the weak one. But when you spend a lifetime with someone who tells you you're less clever, less capable, less everything, you start to believe it. My husband, Alan, used to joke about how I'd fall apart without him. And for a long time, I did. I clung to that marriage like it was my proof of worth. Until the day I found the folder. It was 6 months ago. I'd gone into his office to dust, something he never liked me to do. He'd always say, "Don't touch my files, Maggie. You'll just mess things up." That day, I didn't listen. I opened his drawer, and there it was, a thin manila folder with my name written across it in his handwriting. Margaret Allen. Inside were copies of emails, statements, and a will. One that didn't look like the one we'd signed together years ago. My name was barely on it. At first, I thought it was some kind of mistake. But the more I read, the clearer it became. Alan had rewritten his will without telling me. He'd left almost everything to his sister, Carol, and a few charitable donations that conveniently went to organizations she was involved with. Me? I was left the house. But not the land it stood on. He'd even changed the insurance beneficiary, from me to her. That was the night I stopped feeling sorry for myself. It took me 2 days to stop shaking. Then, I began quietly collecting my own evidence, bank records, copies of his new will, emails from his lawyer. I didn't know exactly what I'd do with it, but I knew one thing: I wouldn't go down silent. So I waited. I played my role. The grieving wife. The quiet woman in the background. I even brought Carol soup when Alan was in the hospital. She called me sweet, and I almost laughed. When he finally passed, I didn't feel relief. I felt clarity. The kind that comes when you stop being afraid of what you'll lose, and start realizing what you never really had. So, when Carol leaned in at the funeral and called me weak, I almost thanked her. Because she had no idea that in that little envelope resting on her brother's casket, there was a truth that would shatter her perfect image of him. The service ended. People stood to leave, offering me soft smiles and sympathetic touches. I nodded politely, but my eyes never left that casket. I knew what came next would change everything. Soft piano fades. The screen lingers on the casket and the white envelope resting atop it. Then fade to black. After the service, the church slowly emptied. Mourners whispered in small circles, exchanging memories I barely recognized. I sat alone for a while, pretending to fix my gloves, waiting for the right moment. Carol lingered near the altar with 2 of Alan's golf friends. She was laughing, while his casket was being carried out. I watched her from the pew, that sharp, tight grin on her face. The kind of grin she always had when she thought she'd won something. When she finally approached me, her tone changed. "Oh, Maggie," she sighed, pressing my hands in hers. "You were so strong up there. Alan would have been proud." I met her eyes. I'm sure he would have. Her gaze flickered to the casket being loaded into the hearse. "By the way, that envelope. Should I, give it to the attorney? You looked emotional. Didn't want you to forget." I smiled softly. "Don't worry, Carol. You'll see it soon enough." And I meant that. She'd see every page. That night, the house was so quiet it felt like it was holding its breath. I made tea, sat by the window, and waited. Because I knew what was coming. I'd left instructions. See, a week before Alan died, I met with his lawyer. Not his new lawyer, the one he hired in secret, but our family lawyer, Mr. Chambers. He'd known us for 20 years. When I showed him the folder I'd found, his face turned pale. He said softly, "Mrs. Allen? This is fraud. And if what you're saying is true, your husband's sister was involved." That's when I knew the truth was bigger than betrayal, it was theft. So, I made copies. Legal ones. Certified and notarized. And that envelope on Alan's casket? That wasn't the real evidence. That was my message. Inside it, there was a letter, addressed to Carol. I wrote it in my own hand. "Dear Carol, Alan always said I was the weak one. But a weak woman doesn't find what I found. A weak woman doesn't build a case. A weak woman doesn't protect what's hers. You took more than my husband's loyalty. You took my security, my home, my trust. And I'm taking it back, legally, and publicly. By the time you read this, our lawyer will have filed everything. The truth will not stay buried with him. Maggie." It didn't take long. Around 8:30 that night, my phone started buzzing, first once, then again, and again. Carol's name flashed across the screen. I didn't answer. Then the text came, "What did you do, Maggie? You can't be serious about this. We can talk this out, please call me." I set my phone down and turned up the TV. For the first time in months, I wasn't scared of her voice. The next morning, I drove to the lawyer's office. Mr. Chambers greeted me with that same calm, steady smile he'd had when I was just a nervous young bride signing my first mortgage papers. He slid a folder toward me. "It's all filed. The court will freeze the estate until we resolve the dispute. Carol can't access a dime." I nodded, feeling my chest rise with something unfamiliar, power. "She's going to be furious," he said. "She already is," I replied. "But I'm done being quiet." That afternoon, Carol showed up at my house. She didn't knock gently. Bang, bang, bang. I opened the door halfway, enough to see her face, red, streaked with tears, hair undone. "How could you?" she spat. "After everything Alan did for you?" "For me?" I said, my voice steady. "Carol, he left me with nothing but bills. He left you with everything. Until now." She shook her head. "You'll ruin his name." I took a slow breath, then said something I'd been holding in for years. "He ruined it himself, Carol. I'm just setting the record straight." She froze, her eyes darting past me to the framed photo of Alan on the mantel. For a moment, her voice softened. "He always said you'd never survive without him." I met her gaze. He was wrong. Then, without another word, I closed the door. That night, I sat at my dining table, surrounded by silence, not the lonely kind, but the peaceful kind. I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my journal. I hadn't written in months. On the first page, I wrote just one line: "Being weak was just my disguise." And now, it no longer fits. I didn't know what the next few weeks would bring, the court hearings, the family gossip, the whispers around town, but for once, I wasn't afraid to face it. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the weak one. I was the one who knew. Soft music plays. Fade to a close-up of the letter on the casket, then dissolve into Maggie closing her journal at night. For a week, the house felt heavier than usual. The sympathy flowers began to wilt, their petals falling across unopened condolence cards. The phone rang less, and the silence settled in like dust. But there was one call I was expecting, from Mr. Chambers. And when it came, everything I thought I knew about my husband changed. "Mrs. Allen," he said carefully, "we've found something strange in your husband's financial records." I remember sitting down slowly, clutching the armrest. "Strange how?" He hesitated. "Do you recall a property purchase in your name? About 6 years ago?" I blinked. "No. I've lived here in this house for 42 years. Alan would never, that's the thing," he interrupted gently. "It's not this house. It's a lakeside cabin, listed under both your names. And Carol's." I froze. "Carol's?" "Yes," he said. "It appears your husband used your joint savings to buy it, but he listed her as a co-owner. And he signed your name." For a moment, the world spun. The kettle hissed in the background, the clock ticked, and I couldn't hear anything else but the echo of that one word, forged. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every memory of Carol's smug little comments played back like ghosts. "Alan always trusted me with the details. You wouldn't understand the business side of things. We just want to make sure you're taken care of, Maggie." Taken care of. As if I were some fragile little doll who couldn't read a bank statement. Now, I saw it for what it was, manipulation. She wasn't helping him manage things. She was helping herself to things. The next morning, I went to the cabin address Mr. Chambers had sent me. It was 2 hours away, a pretty little property by the lake, hidden behind tall cedar trees. And there, parked right out front, was Carol's car. I sat there in my own, watching through the windshield as she carried boxes inside. Boxes labeled with my husband's handwriting. He had kept things here. Not just documents, but memories. When she finally drove off, I went up to the door. It wasn't locked, because of course, she thought no one else would come here. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cigars and pine. And there, on the mantel above the fireplace, was a framed photo that nearly broke me. Alan and Carol. Standing by this very lake. Arms around each other. Smiling. No me. No trace of me anywhere. I walked deeper into the cabin, trembling. In the corner, there was a desk, the kind Alan always used for his projects. Inside the drawer were letters. Dozens of them. Not love letters. No. Business correspondence. Real estate, transfers, insurance, all of it linking to an account I'd never seen before. And at the bottom of the drawer, a manila envelope marked, Personal, Carol. I opened it. Inside were receipts, deeds, and one document that made my stomach drop. A will. His will. It had been written just 2 months before his death. And in it, he'd left everything to Carol, the house, the investments, the accounts. Everything except for one vague sentence at the end. To my wife, Margaret Allen, I leave the peace she always desired. That was it. No property. No money. Just a line meant to sound poetic, and cruelly ironic. I sank onto the floor, the papers shaking in my hands. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was legal. It was total. When I got back home, I called Mr. Chambers immediately. He listened in silence as I told him everything, then said, Maggie, if this will is valid, she'll contest everything you filed. But if that signature of yours on the cabin deed was forged, she's in serious trouble. I'm sure it was, I whispered. I'd never have signed away something that wasn't mine. Then we'll prove it, he said. But Maggie, are you ready for that? It'll get ugly. I stared out the window, watching the clouds roll over the trees. Mr. Chambers, I've been living in ugly for 20 years. I'm ready for the truth. The following days were a blur of meetings, notarizations, and statements. I gave them handwriting samples, financial papers, even old letters Alan had written me. The forensic examiner worked fast. Within 48 hours, she had an answer. She looked at me across the desk and said quietly, Mrs. Allen, this signature isn't yours. And worse, the one labeled Alan Allen isn't his either. My heart dropped. Then whose? It matches Carol's. That was the turning point. The moment when grief turned into clarity. It wasn't just my husband's betrayal anymore, it was hers. She hadn't just whispered about me being weak. She'd tried to erase me altogether. But she underestimated one thing, the weak don't disappear. They adapt. The night before the next court meeting, I sat at my kitchen table, sorting through every document, photo, and letter. And there, between 2 bank statements, I found a small handwritten note, from Alan. It wasn't dated, but I recognized the pen and his tired, shaky handwriting. Maggie, if you're reading this, then I couldn't fix it in time. I made a mistake, one I can't undo. Carol promised me it was just for tax reasons. I didn't know she'd taken more. I'm sorry for what I've caused. You deserved better than this. Alan, I sat there for a long time, just staring at those words. Tears fell, not for him, not anymore, but for the years I'd wasted trying to earn respect that never came. And then, quietly, I folded that note, placed it in my purse, and whispered, I forgive you. But I won't protect her. The morning of the hearing, I stood before the mirror, buttoning my navy blue coat. It had been years since I wore something that made me feel powerful. Not pretty. Not polite. Powerful. Outside, the sky was gray, the kind that promised rain but didn't yet deliver it. I took it as a sign. Some storms, after all, wait for the right moment to break. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and disinfectant. When I walked in, Carol was already there, perfectly polished, pearls gleaming, whispering to her lawyer. She looked up as I entered and smirked, just like she had at the funeral. Didn't expect to see you here, Maggie, she said sweetly. This is all just a formality. You know Alan wanted me to have everything. I looked right into her eyes. We'll see what Alan wanted. She laughed softly. Still pretending you're strong, are you? I didn't answer. I just opened my folder, the one I'd been waiting weeks to show. When the hearing began, her lawyer spoke first, all confidence and arrogance. Your Honor, he began, Mr. Allen's will is clear. He left his estate to his sister, who supported him through his later years. Mrs. Allen has no legal claim. The judge nodded, flipping through pages. And what evidence does the widow have to dispute this? That was my cue. I stood up, every eye on me. My hands trembled slightly, but my voice was steady. Your Honor, I began, this isn't about who Alan loved more. It's about what's true, and what's forged. I handed the first set of documents to the clerk. These are the property records for a lakeside cabin purchased under my name, and my sister-in-law's. I never signed them. The judge glanced at the page, then looked up sharply. You're saying this is a forgery? Yes, I said calmly. And not just mine. My husband's signature, too. Her lawyer scoffed. That's a serious accusation. I smiled faintly. So is stealing a man's estate before he's even buried. Then I handed over the forensic report, neatly stapled, notarized, undeniable. The handwriting analysis confirms, the judge read aloud, that both signatures were forged by one person. Carol Hastings. There was a pause, a heavy, suffocating silence that filled the room. Carol's smirk vanished. Her hands went pale as her lawyer snatched the papers, flipping through them. That's impossible, he stammered. This must be a mistake. The judge raised an eyebrow. Are you implying the court-appointed expert fabricated her findings? He sank back into his chair. Carol's face turned red, then white. And finally, I said, pulling one last envelope from my folder, this was found among my husband's personal papers. A handwritten letter. I'd like to read it aloud. Carol shot up from her seat. No, that's private, the judge waved his hand. Sit down, Miss Hastings. I unfolded the letter, the paper trembling just slightly. Maggie, if you're reading this, then I couldn't fix it in time. Carol promised it was just for tax reasons. I didn't know she'd taken more. I'm sorry for what I've caused. You deserved better. I looked up. That's Alan's handwriting. The examiner confirmed it. The courtroom was silent. Even Carol's breathing sounded loud. The judge leaned back, exhaling. Mrs. Allen, I've seen many estate disputes. But rarely one so deliberate. He turned to Carol. Ms. Hastings, pending full investigation. I'm freezing all assets tied to your name, including any accounts connected to this estate. Carol's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her pearls suddenly looked like a chain. Outside the courthouse, the first raindrops finally began to fall. Reporters weren't there, no crowd, no spectacle. Just me, standing in the drizzle, breathing for the first time in months. Mr. Chambers joined me. You did well, he said softly. You kept your dignity. That's rare. I smiled faintly. She called me weak. But weakness isn't what breaks in silence. It's what endures. He nodded. And what will you do now, Mrs. Allen? I looked up at the gray sky. Live. On my own terms this time. A few weeks later, I received another envelope in the mail, from the court. The investigation confirmed everything. Carol had been siphoning funds for years, even setting up fake accounts under my husband's name. The judge awarded me full control of the estate, and recommended criminal charges for her. When I told my daughter, she hugged me tight and whispered, Mom, you're stronger than any of them ever saw. That night, I sat by the fireplace, the same one Alan used to sit beside, and opened the envelope I'd left on his casket. Inside were the documents, every last dollar, property, and account Carol thought she owned. It had all come back to me. And on top of it, a note I'd written that morning before the funeral, for the one who thought I was weak, may strength find you in the silence you once mocked. A month later, I visited the cemetery again. The sky was calm this time. I placed fresh lilies on Alan's grave and whispered, you were wrong about me. I wasn't the weak one, just the quiet one. Then I turned to leave. As I walked away, I noticed someone watching from across the street, Carol. Her eyes were hollow, her clothes rumpled. She looked smaller somehow. I didn't stop. I didn't wave. I didn't speak. Sometimes revenge doesn't need fire. Sometimes, it's just peace, and the knowledge that they can never touch you again. Final lines for video narration and people say forgiveness is strength. Maybe that's true. But for me, strength was walking away, knowing she finally saw what weakness really looks like, needing to destroy others just to feel powerful. And that night, for the first time in years, I slept without dreams.